Jaya Shriman Narayana. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Dharma Rashtra Jayate. Surya Vansha Jayate. Om Hri Om. Namaste, everyone, and welcome to the International Sanatana Dharma Society live stream. This is something that we do every Monday, and we have for approximately 3 years now, something like that. Our YouTube channel itself is much older than that. It goes back almost to the very beginning of YouTube, actually. I think we may have started our channel maybe a year after YouTube itself was started. So the channel itself is quite old, and more importantly, the channel itself is just one tiny, tiny little fraction of what is actually done by this movement known as the International Sanatana Dharma Society. Many people, of course, know us through our videos, through this Dharma Nation channel, etc. But in actuality, even the channel itself, even though, again, we've had it almost since the beginning of YouTube, the channel itself is only one thing that is done by this movement known as the International Sanatana Dharma Society. And this movement itself is a religious nonprofit that has one really primary goal, and that is to restore Dharma upon the face of the earth in every single aspect that it can be restored. And that means in every way: politically, philosophically, spiritually, economically, culturally, scientifically, etc., etc., etc. This is the goal of this movement, the ISDS. And I am the Acharya of the ISDS, and it is absolutely my pleasure to be here with you today. What we're going to be doing today is actually something somewhat special, something somewhat different from what we've done in the past. And what we're going to be looking at is indeed Arya Manushya, what is called Arya Manushya, and that means the noble man, the noble person, the noble individual. You know, for individuals who have studied Sanskrit, which is not many people, but enough people, you know that especially in the older layers of Sanskrit, in classical Sanskrit and before that as well, you find this word Arya everywhere. And in fact, you find it more so in, indeed, classical Sanatana Dharma, classical Vedic spirituality and civilization than you do today. In modern day Hinduism, other than one obscure sect called Arya Samaj, other than that, you don't find the word Arya anymore. But again, if you go back to the oldest layers of Vedic scriptures, you find this term again and again and again and again, repeatedly throughout almost all the scriptures, actually. And what the term very simply means is noble. Noble. An individual who is Arya is an individual who is noble in their conduct, in their character. And then, of course, this begs the question, what does it mean to be noble? Well, there's no mystery about this. It's not a matter of debate. It's not a matter of, oh, we all have our own idea of what is meant by nobility. No, this is set in stone. This is set in titanium, actually. What it means to be a noble individual is that in everything that you think, and everything that you say, and everything that you do, you are doing all of these things perfectly in conformance with Dharma. That you are in every way acting upon Dharma, in everything that you are, beginning first and foremost with your very personhood itself. That is, with who you are as a person. That intrinsically you are an individual who would never veer away from Dharma. You would never wish to. But more, what does this look like as far as others looking upon you as an individual who, for argument's sake, is an Arya, is a noble individual? It means that they are looking upon an individual for whom, when they observe that person, they are seeing a living representation of what it means to indeed follow Dharma perfectly. This is what Arya means. And then the term Manushya. Manushya. I've used this term several times. Again, a term that sadly has fallen by the wayside in modern day Hinduism. It's so sad that when you read the scriptures of Sanatana Dharma, very specifically the Vedic scriptures, if you read the Shruti and Smriti, and then the ancillary scriptures as well, what you see is a very different picture, to the point where even the terminology that's used is not terminology that's used very much anymore. What to speak of philosophically or in practice or much of anything else in modern day Hinduism. But of course, the ISDS, the way that we follow Sanatana Dharma, is indeed in accordance with the most ancient strata of Vedic civilization. So thus we retain these very important words and terms that you find throughout the scriptures, and that the scriptures themselves have made clear are very important terms. So Manushya. Manushya means capital M, man. Now, just like when in English someone will say, oh, in the entire history of man. See, now, of course, we have small-minded, small IQ'd feminists who will think that what is meant by man is quite literally the male gender, not understanding how English is used, and how English itself, if you go back far enough, is in actuality a reflection of Sanskrit. What is meant by man, when you say this in English, and in addition, what is meant by Manushya, is humanity. Now, the reason why we say man or Manushya is because, in fact, let's start with the most recent and then go back. The term man comes from Manushya. It comes from Manu. And what a Manushya is a descendant of Manu, who was the first human, one could say, in Vedic spirituality, going back millions upon millions of years. So thus, when an individual says Manushya, what is meant by this is humanity, human beings. In the same way, this is the case in English as well. This is why in proper English, you don't hear people say such things as, oh, in the history of man and woman. It's not necessary. Man itself, understood in this proper context, means humanity. So thus, Manushya means a proper human being, an individual who is considered to be an actual human. Now, I'll be very blunt about this, and the Vedic scriptures are very blunt about this. What constitutes a human is not merely that you have 2 eyes, 2 arms, opposable thumbs, the ability to walk upright, and the ability to speak in commonly understood language, or even the ability to somewhat think. This alone is not what constitutes an actual human in accordance with Vedic spirituality. Rather, what is considered to be a human is someone who distinguishes himself from that which is non-human. Very logical. Very logical. Why are you listening to me now? Why are you not a cow? Why are you not an egret? Why are you not fill in the blank? Why is it that you are a human being? Well, it is because of the fact that, yes, you have all these talents. You have the ability to understand philosophy, etc. But more than this, if you are a proper Manushya, what this means is that in all of your conduct, you have transcended mere animal needs. Not that you don't have them, not that you don't have to eat, mate, defend yourself, etc., etc., do all of these things. That certainly the animals also have to. Indeed, all beings have to. But more than this, what distinguishes a human from a non-human is the fact that we have the ability to transcend our mere biology alone, whereas the animals don't. So indeed, even when it comes to some beings who they would otherwise look human, they would otherwise seem human, Are they actually? Well, they are to the degree that they also have that ability to transcend the merely biological and indeed to manifest in themselves the transcendent altogether. So this is what Manushya means, human proper, in the proper sense of that term. So all that being said, Arya Manushya, a noble human being, a noble human. This is what the topic is going to be today. Now, why is this important? Well, anyone, of course, with any modicum of wisdom, of insight, anyone who has their eyes open and has looked around them today understands that indeed we have a crisis in humanity. We have a crisis going on spiritually, culturally, politically, again, in every way humanly conceivable, in which people have lost sight of what it means to be noble, to have actual nobility. Sadly, when we hear the word nobility, if we hear the word at all, which is very rare these days, we tend to think of, oh, kings and queens or something silly like that. Oh, that person is a noble. How silly. That is what this very important term has been reduced to. That, oh, we think of the Queen of England who passed away. Something silly like this. Oh, this is not what's meant by nobility. What is meant by nobility is, again, maintaining a certain high degree of conduct and character such that you are, while in bodily form, you are manifesting the divine through you in such a way that you are a blessing to all beings who meet you. This is what nobility means. This is what it means to be noble. So, with all that being said, we're going to look at several verses from several of the Dharma Shastras, actually. As people know, for the last several months, I've been kind of on this very interesting trajectory where I've been looking at many, many verses from the Dharma Shastras, very specifically. This is something that I enjoy doing because no one does it. Everyone comments on Bhagavad Gita. Everyone comments on the scriptures that most people have heard of, but I like also exploring those scriptures that almost no one has heard of, actually. And the reason why is because, interestingly, while certainly Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, the major Upanishads, Yoga Sutras, etc., while these are all crucial to know, there's a reason why they are so famous, is because of both the philosophical content, but also the accessibility of these scriptures. The fact that, oh, a person can indeed read them and they're not too much of a mystery. Of course, now that I say that, of course, most people don't even understand these scriptures, but they're less of a mystery, let's say. They're more easy to penetrate. But it is especially interesting when we look at these lesser known scriptures, and these are scriptures, because they do tend to be a little bit harder to understand, but also for me especially, they're fascinating. There are nuggets of gold. There are diamonds, there are jewels that are found in some of these lesser known Upanishads, the Dharma Shastras, etc., scriptures that very few people have heard of, where when you look at these, you discover things that are truly valuable and lessons for us today. And indeed, it's interesting, several days ago in my reading, again, I was going through the Dharma Shastras, and there are quite a few of them, actually, and I found these truly beautiful jewels of verses that are there talking about what it means to be a noble person. So with that, we're going to dive into these verses. And the first verse we're going to look at, actually the first three are from the Vyasa Samhita or the Vyasa Dharma Shastra, which means the same thing. So the first verse that we will look at is again Vyasa Samhita and chapter 4, verse 58. And this verse proceeds in this way. Of 100 people, only one is born a hero. Of 1,000 people, only one is a wise man. Of 100,000 people, one may be an orator. I am hesitant to say whether a man of true charities will ever take his birth or not. That is Vyasa who wrote this. And who is Vyasa? You know, Vyasa is not just a name. Vyasa wrote all the Puranas. Vyasa wrote the Mahabharata. He compiled the Vedas. Vyasa is one of the most important of all the rishis, and he's the individual who writes this. So how interesting. Now, First, overall, let me talk about what is the purpose of this verse. What is Vyasa trying to explain here? And then we'll go through the actual verse, line by line. What Vyasa is trying to explain is indeed something that at one point previous to, and it varies, maybe 50 years ago, 100 years ago, certainly before the so-called Enlightenment era, which was actually the beginning of the darkness in our world, everyone understood the concept of hierarchy and the concept that when you're talking about the best individuals in any field, you're talking about a tiny, tiny, tiny minority of individuals. You're talking about, and dare I say the word, you're talking about an elite of individuals. Not elitist, but an elite of humble individuals who are the best in their specific field and who no one can match. This was something that was understood at one time, that this was the nature of the world. And indeed, it was beginning with when we began to leave this very important lesson of natural law behind us, that the world began to descend into darkness hundreds of years ago. Well, the Vedic scriptures don't play games, and neither do I. Indeed, to be an individual who is the best, who is, and Vyasa gives only a few examples. Oh, a hero, a great orator. I can also mention many other things. An individual who is an accomplished meditator, an accomplished philosopher, etc., etc. You're talking about one in hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands. Indeed. When it comes to being the best, this is not an equal opportunity endeavor in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. But rather, there tends to be a small minority of individuals who are the very best in their given field. Now, let's go through this. Of 100 people, only one is born to be a hero. And we know that this is the case, of course. Vyasa here is starting with, what are the things, let's say, that are more commonly found and then becoming rarer and rarer and rarer. He begins with the hero. Now, we know that this is the case. So, for example, just to give the most obvious example, in any given nation, every nation has a military. Whether that military is, let's say an army, Marines, Air Force today, et cetera, et cetera. How many individuals actually join a military? Well, it tends to be, interestingly, probably about 1 in 100. Interestingly, it tends to be a minority of individuals who have the discipline, the patriotism, the courage, etc., the ability to learn the specific set of skills that are necessary in order to become a warrior and thus a hero. And of course, what's interesting is, I'm using the military as an example. Here, Vyasa doesn't necessarily even say the military, he says a hero. It is 1 out of 100 individuals who becomes a hero in any sense of that term. So think of anyone in your life or who you have known either personally or you have known of that individual. And they have engaged in a truly heroic act. Well, we know that of 100 people, that one person engaged in that heroic act, whatever it is, they could be just an ordinary person on the street, just an ordinary person with an ordinary job, and they see a house that's on fire, and the fire department hasn't reached there yet, and they see, oh my God, there are people in there. They will run in and try to bring children out. That's a hero, but it's also someone who's 1 in 100, because everyone else, the whole crowd, they're just standing there watching. But that one person will run in. Thus, 1 in 100 is a hero. Now let's go on. Of 1,000 people, only one is a wise man. Indeed, what is this saying? Several things. Why is the number going up? Well, being a hero is something that's truly important. But it's even more rare to find an individual who also is wise, who also has the ability to think philosophically, to think clearly, to think logically, to figure what is the correct course of action to do, both in his own life, but then generally speaking. So indeed, this is why when it comes to individuals who pose themselves as wise, i.e. individuals who have opinions, which everyone does, indeed, everybody has an opinion. but that does not make an individual necessarily wise. What it means to be wise is indeed to see the bigger picture. What it means to be wise is to be able to see things objectively and not selfishly. What it means to be wise is to face the reality of our world and who we are and where we find ourselves situated, etc., etc., etc. These are the definitions of what it means to be a wise individual, and most importantly, that knowledge that the wise person has is rooted in the eternal. See, anyone can be smart. You see, I would challenge almost anyone in my audience, especially today with AI. I would challenge almost anyone in my audience to sit down in front of a computer and challenge that computer to see who can regurgitate more facts. You or the computer. The computer will win. But is the computer wise? No, the computer is not wise because the computer is not even alive. It does not have its finger on the pulse of the eternal. That being the case, yes, only a human can be wise, and even then, only 1 out of 1,000. Let's go on. This one is interesting, actually, and it makes sense if you understand what Vyasa is saying here. He goes on, and of 100,000 people, one may be an orator. One may be an orator. Let me tell you, as an individual who spent many, many years in college and who's known many, many extremely qualified individuals, both as far as their academic qualifications, but then just people who are very, very smart, etc. To be a wise person is one thing, but to be able to communicate that wisdom in a way where you now achieve maximal effect with your audience, that's something entirely different. That's something more rare. But those of us who have been in school in any sense, high school, anything like this, for those of us who have been in college, how many individuals had professors, for example, who, they were in the top 5 in their field in the nation. No one could match the knowledge that they had. But then when it came to teaching, they could barely teach anything. They were not very good orators. They did not know how to communicate in such a way that they, perfectly communicated the content of their knowledge to their audience such that their audience now understood, but also B, that they had the ability to sway that audience simply with their words alone. This is the rarest of things. Indeed, you can find a hero, you can find a wise person, but to find someone who knows how to teach in such a way that with his words alone this person can change the world, that's very rare. But now, as if this isn't enough, 1 out of 100,000 people. Now Vyasa goes on and he finishes this verse. And he finishes it in a very interesting way. Numbers are pushed to the side now. He says, I am hesitant to say whether a man of true charities will ever take his birth or not. So in other words, when it comes now to this very important quality of being a truly charitable individual, and later on, you just be patient, later on, Vyasa himself gives the definition of what he means by such an individual. But Vyasa says, to find such an individual who truly knows how to give in charity, I hope I'll find such a person, Vyasa says. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. So how interesting. When it comes to an individual who is truly selflessly giving of himself without need for remuneration, when it comes to finding an individual who knows how to give in compassion perfectly, why to give, how to give, to whom to give, etc., that is the rarest thing of all, according to Vyasa. Now, let's go on. Are we starting to see that what are we speaking about with all of these important verses, all of these important qualities? We're talking about the Arya Manushya. We're talking about that individual who is the noble man. This is what Vyasa is speaking about with all these verses. So now let's go on. We're going to go to now chapter 4 and verse 59. And Vyasa proceeds in this way. A conquest alone does not make a hero, nor do studies alone make a wise man. Eloquence alone does not make a person an orator, nor do gifts make a charitable man. Very nice. Very good. So how interesting. All the things that we would associate with these various sorts of people alone do not make that person truly what they state that they are, what they claim to be. This is what Vyasa is saying here. But rather, there's something deeper that makes the person a hero, a wise man, etc., etc. Now, let's just go through this. A conquest alone does not make a hero. Again, this is a given. Simply because an individual has the ability to conquer another nation doesn't mean that that person, let's say a general, or let's say a king who's ordering generals, a president who's ordering the bombing of other nations, etc., etc. Is that person a hero because they won? Is that individual truly a hero because they had the ability to order their military to attack a different nation, and due to superior everything, superior weaponry, technology, etc., they won, they conquered that little nation? Does that make that individual who ordered this a hero? Of course not. Of course not. Rather, what constitutes a hero is, as we were saying before, first of all, it does not have to be something that is pertaining to the military per se. Rather, what it means is bravery, courage, such that when you see that something needs to be done and everyone around you is too scared to do anything, you are the one person who selflessly will run to the front lines and do what needs to be done. And when I say the front lines, again, it can be that house that's on fire. It can be that child who somehow is being abused, and you go there and you stop the abuse, etc., etc. 1,000 scenarios that we can give. This is what makes an individual a hero, not necessarily someone who orders their military to conquer another nation, but rather it's personal bravery, it's personal courage. And indeed, this is one of the characteristics of an Arya Manushya, of a noble man. This is one of the characteristics of nobility itself, is indeed to have this sort of personal courage, such that when you see that the right thing needs to be done in this specific situation, there's something terrible that's happening, there are people in pain, there's someone who might be injured, etc., etc., regardless of the fact that everyone around you may be paralyzed in fear, you're not paralyzed and you do the right thing. If you are such an individual who, again, regardless of what most people, the majority around you, will do, which is they'll do nothing, if you are the sort of person who you will put yourself on the line and you will do the right thing, you're a hero. You are a hero. What are you right now? Are you a plumber? If you put yourself on the line for the benefit of others, you're a hero. So this applies not just to warriors, not just to the military. Them as well, certainly. But again, it's a personal attribute, a personal characteristic that makes an individual a hero. Arya Vira, a noble hero. Now let's go on. Nor do studies alone make a wise man. Indeed, we discussed this a little bit before. It's not a matter of merely quantity. You see, being smart versus being wise is one of quantity versus quality. If you're smart, what does that mean? It means you had a lot of time on your hands. You see, it's actually not that big a deal. Oh, I know, I can name the capital of every single state in the nation. Oh, you must have had a lot of time on your hands. See, that makes you smart. It doesn't make you wise. This is quantity. This is a matter of, oh, you had time, so you read. Or I guess today people don't read. People go to the internet. We read maybe Wikipedia, watch a bunch of videos. You accumulate knowledge. That makes you a smart individual in that indeed you have a lot of data floating around in your mind. But the quality is not there. To simply read and study and read means that you have accumulated a lot of facts. But what makes an individual wise is indeed the depthful quality of what it is that they know. That again, it's not merely factual, but it is knowledge, the likes of which touch upon all the deeper aspects of what it means phenomenologically to be a human situated within the scope of this material world with all the experiences that encroach upon us, and knowing how to live their life in such a way that their own life, has meaning. That's a wise man. That's a wise individual. So indeed, that comes not just from study alone. All right, let's go on. Eloquence alone does not make a person an orator. Indeed, this is the case as well. We know that people will take courses. There are courses that are available. You can watch YouTube videos, how to give a good speech, great speeches of the 20th century, and you'll watch all these videos of all these people giving speeches, etc., etc. Well, this is eloquence. This is something which, again, is something that is learned. It's a learned behavior, as is true for so many different behaviors. These are behaviors that you can learn. What it takes to be someone who is a powerful orator, on the other hand, is that their speech is empowered by something higher than them. That's not merely the fact that, again, they studied how to speak well, that they listened to very good speakers, that they imitated very good speakers, but rather those individuals who are the greatest of speakers, the content of their speech is the greatest of content, i.e., they're not talking about the best ways of making ice cream. Rather, they're talking about topics the significance of which are cosmic in scope. And on top of that, they are empowered to speak. They are empowered quite literally by the gods. And indeed, we find this in so many different cultures where the gods indeed empower people with eloquence, but also to be great orators. Or the individual can be empowered by God himself. So this is what makes a person truly an orator. Nor do gifts make a charitable man. Yes, we discovered that every time Christmas comes along. The person who gives out all the most gifts, all the best gifts, is that really necessarily the most charitable person in their heart? No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. We know of billionaires, we know of millionaires, of billionaires who will often start foundations, who will make a very big show with all the mainstream media watching them and photographing them and filming them, giving some sort of charity to some nonprofit or something like that. And in actuality, the person is so wealthy that that it's like giving away nothing for them. It would be the equivalent of someone else, a normal person, giving away $1. But more, why are they doing this? They're giving away in charity, indeed, for that fame. Well, again, it's not merely the gifts that you give that make you a charitable person. Rather, what makes you a charitable person is that even if you have next to nothing, you still want to give. And you want to give not seeking fame, not seeking any sort of recognition. You don't want your name on a brick, on a church or a temple or something like that. No, you simply are inherently a giving individual. And as a result, you wish to give. That is a truly charitable individual. That is a person who truly gives dhanam or charity to others. Very good. Now, that being said, let's go on to the next verse. And we're still in the Vyasa Samhita or Vyasa Dharma Shastra. And we're still in chapter 4, but this is now verse 60. Now the definitions, the all-important definitions of all these individuals, and indeed what makes them truly Arya, what makes them truly noble. And now Vyasa proceeds. He who has conquered his senses is the real hero. He who practices virtues is really wise. A speaker is he who discusses satisfying and beneficial topics. And he who gives with reverence is the maker of true gifts. So, in each of these categories, again, what is being spoken of is the Arya Manushya. And that is, let me make this personal. If your goal in life is indeed to be a noble individual, a noble man, a noble woman, a noble person, well, these are some clues as far as how you can do this. And indeed, this is why Vyasa gives these various categories, because he's also telling us something else very interesting here. He's saying in every field, in every important field, in every good field, every beneficial field that a person can think of, you can be noble. whatever that specific field is. Again, as long as it's a good field, a beneficial field, something that's actually helping people, you can practice nobility. But now let's go through this. Now, speaking about the hero, Vyasa says, he who has conquered his senses is the real hero. Indeed, and who is this person? Who is the person who has conquered his senses? Once again, as is often the case these days, especially here in the temple room, I have several of my disciples who are here. We have temple room very nicely filled with some of my disciples. I'm going to simply ask, who is that individual who has conquered his senses? One word.
Yogi.
A little louder?
Yogi.
A yogi. Very good. This is who Vyasa is speaking of. Who is that individual who has conquered his senses? That is an individual who first and foremost has the strongest of spiritual foundations. It is that individual who indeed understands what is the meaning of life. What is the meaning of life? It's not merely to live the way that everyone else in society lives, all those individuals who really are in illusion, but rather to have your own path such that you wish to achieve excellence in everything that you are, in everything that you say, in everything that you think, in everything that you do, etc. And the word for this is a yogi. Is a yogi. So indeed, who is a true hero? An individual who has the discipline, an individual who has the stamina, an individual who has the intelligence, an individual who has the courage, etc., 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 the steadiness, the determination to control his own senses. You see, when you have your senses in control, now you are an individual who is a true hero. Veera. Veera is the term. This is the Sanskrit term for hero. Interestingly, the term Veera, historically, Sanskritically, has been used both for individuals who are actual warriors, but more, it's also almost a synonym for yogi. So thus, throughout the history of Sanatana Dharma, interestingly, even Buddhism and Jainism, which are just offshoots of Sanatana Dharma, but in the history of dharmic religions, what we have seen is that the word Veera is almost synonymous with yogi. So the yogi has always been recognized as an individual who is a hero. Why is this the case? Because they do the most difficult of all things, compared to which, indeed, even rushing into a building that's on fire seems like nothing in comparison. And that is, the yogi has the discipline, the self-discipline, to control themselves, to control all of their senses in such a way that they are not led astray, they are not led into illusion, but rather they have a mind that is awake. That's the true hero, according to Vyasa. Now let's go on. He who practices virtues is really wise. Indeed, all the real philosophers would agree with this. Plato would agree with this. Aristotle, in the Nicomachean Ethics, his main work on ethics, which I studied literally backwards and forwards, he would agree with this. Virtue, virtue, virtue is the hallmark of the wise individual, of the philosopher. That is, the philosopher must be an individual who is not merely talking, speculating, writing all of his papers for the academic journals in order to gain tenure. No. A truly wise individual, a true philosopher, is someone who indeed in his own life practices virtue. He knows the difference between good and evil, and in every case he chooses the good. Period. That's a wise individual. Anyone who falls short of that, maybe they're smart. They had some time on their hands. They read a book or two, but they're not wise. Let's go on. A speaker is he who discusses satisfying and beneficial topics. Indeed, this is the definition of a true speaker, of someone who is a true orator. It's not merely that they have eloquence, but rather the content of what they're saying and the effect of what they are saying. And now here we come to the chase when it comes to the orator. Every orator, if they're good, has an effect upon their audience. For most orators, think of politicians, Think of really good politicians, actually, like really good speakers. Think about Abraham Lincoln, even. Someone like this. Whether they're someone like this or any sort of orator, they're a preacher of some sort, etc. They all seek to sway their audience. They all seek to have an effect on their audience such that their audience will now change their mind about something or engage in some action or something like this. Well, something different is being said here. It's subtle, but it's crucial. And that is a truly good speaker, a true orator, will not just have that ability, but rather the audience themselves within will change for the better. They will be individuals who, as a result of that person's speaking ability and what they said and how they said it, and indeed, again, being empowered by God Himself, they now have satisfaction and they are benefited. Not just swayed, but they actually are benefited. Now, of course, what are the highest examples of what can be shown to be such orators? Spiritual teachers, gurus, acharyas, real gurus, individuals who have the ability that they speak to an audience, and the individuals in that audience who have the ears to hear are benefited. They become better individuals. Not just that they're swayed. Oh, all right, I'm not going to follow this religion, I'm going to follow that religion now. Not just, oh, okay, I'm not going to vote for this party now, I'm going to vote for that party. No, not just swayed, but that they within are benefited. They are better for having heard this orator than they were beforehand. So in other words, that true orator has the ability to bring about enlightenment on the part of the individual. This is why the greatest orators in history were not FDR, Martin Luther King, this person, that person. Again, when you look at videos of, the greatest speakers of the 20th century, no, not any of these people. The greatest orators were those spiritual teachers of the past, who we all know. They were a Jesus, they were a Buddha, they were a Vyasa, they were a Narada Muni, they were Ramanuja Acharya, they were Prabhupada. They were individuals who, when they spoke, as a result of their speech, which still reverberates in the ether now, the world has changed for the better. And anyone who heard them, again, if they had the ears to hear, they benefited inwardly. That is the greatest of orators. And now finally, for this verse, in the very last clause, Vyasa says, "And he who gives with reverence is the maker of true gifts." This is more profound than it seems. Think of that word, reverence. If you don't know what that word means, not now, but afterward, write it down right now. If you don't 100% know what that word means, just write it down quickly right now. After this live stream is over, look it up. Hopefully in a very old dictionary, which are always the best. What it means to have reverence is something that is akin to worship. Now, this is interesting. This is a very strange thing. What is Vyasa saying here? Let me read this again. He who gives with reverence is the maker of true gifts. So in other words, envision an individual who is truly giving of themselves. Again, it can be anything. What the content of that giving is of less importance. It can be that they give a dime. It can be that they give their life. It can be that they give anything in between. But they are giving with reverence, with almost a worshipful awe. What does this mean? Are they having reverence merely for the actual individual who is there before them, who they are giving to? A little bit, but deeper than this. When they are giving, they are in actuality giving not merely to the individual who they see before them, not just the face that they see and that person in the present condition that they're in. They're poor, they're needy, they're ill, etc. No, they're giving to God. They understand that in actuality, within the heart of that individual is the Paramatman, is God Himself. No. Not that the person is God. See, this is the mistake that smaller minds, Advaitins and New Age people always make. No. That person is not God, but God is residing within their heart. This being the case, when a truly spiritual individual gives to another, in their mind they understand several things. A, Paramatman is there within that person's heart. I am giving as an offering of devotion, not just to this person with his hand out. I am giving, in my mind, to God within that person's heart. Number one. Number two, they also understand that even that person who I am giving to, that a person who is there immediately before me, that individual is an Atman, just as I am. That person, whoever they are, whatever condition they presently find themselves in, whatever illusion, whatever depths of illusion they may be in, they're ultimately a soul as well. They're my brother. They're my sister. This being the case, indeed, when an individual truly gives, they're giving with reverence. In other words, this is karma yoga. In their mind, this is seva, this is service, when they are giving to another, when they're giving charitable gifts. God knows, unlike the politicians and the millionaires and billionaires and trillionaires, it's not just for fame. They're not just giving and waiting for the cameras, smiling for the cameras. No, they're giving as an act of worship. That is true giving. So this is what Vyasa is saying. Now, in this last verse that we just looked at especially, we see the true qualities of the Arya Manushya, of the noble man, the noble individual. Now let's go on to the last verse that we're going to look at. And I just wanted to throw this in because, again, over the weekend, I was reading several of these Dharma Shastras, and I found this one fascinating because it confirms what was said by Vyasa, even though it's a different work. This is the Daksha Samhita, the Daksha Dharma Shastra. And this is chapter 7, verse 18. And in here, it is said, quote, "A hero is not spoken of as one who has merely forcibly taken possessions of another's kingdom. Rather, he who has controlled all of his senses is described by the learned as a true hero." So, again, why did I find this interesting? Because there are so many fake scholars out there who, and not just fake scholars, very sadly, individuals who even claim to be spiritual people on, the path of Hinduism or yoga or something like this. And sadly, they're convinced that, the Vedic scriptures are all man-made and, they all say contradictory things, etc., etc. No, here we have two completely different texts. And here, Daksha Samhita is saying pretty much the exact same thing that was said by Vyasa Samhita. Indeed, I've said this again and again and again, and take it from someone who, unlike 99.9999% of individuals who will try to preach to you about the Vedic scriptures, I've actually read all the Vedic scriptures, which is indeed a truly rare thing. I realized that a long time ago. I wasn't even aware of how rare it was until I was told this many, many times, actually, by people who knew. Take it from me, the Vedic scriptures, every single one of them, hundreds in total, speak with one united voice. There's no contradiction in any of the Vedic scriptures. And anyone who would try to tell you that there is, that person's a fool. Again, that person is not a wise man. Stay away from that individual. Here, again, Daksha is echoing exactly what Vyasa said. Let's just quickly go through this because, again, we've already heard this, but it's still interesting to go through it. So a hero is not spoken of as one who has merely forcibly taken possessions of another's kingdom. So indeed, the stereotype of a warrior who just conquers. No, that's not someone who is a hero. What is a true hero? Again, as Vyasa said, rather, he who has controlled all of his senses is described by who? The learned, not just anyone, as a true hero. In other words, the yogi is the Vira. The yogi is the hero. When you have the discipline to control everything that you are, then at that point, you are unconquerable. The yogi and the yogi alone is unconquerable. Always understand this. So this is what Daksha Samhita also says. Very good. So with that, we're going to stop here. We don't have a lot of time, but we have a little bit of time. If anyone at this point would like to ask any questions, please feel free to do so. And questions very specifically about Sanatana Dharma. There's approximately a 20-second delay. Very good. Here's a good question from Vasil, and it is Namaste Acharyaji. Namaste Vasil, it's very good to see you. Does charity always have to be done anonymously? Isn't it beneficial for the positive example to be known in some context? Yes, absolutely. You're correct about this. It's not necessary for it to always be anonymous. And indeed, that's not the point. The point is that most of the time, when it is especially done non anonymously, in other words, when it's done with trumpets, that's not true charity. That's the point. It's not that the person who gives always has to be anonymous, that they always have to do so in silence and quietly, etc., etc. No, sometimes indeed, when it comes to a cause, for example, if you want to encourage others to then also give to that cause, and I've been at many such functions. For example, when Hindu temples were established, I have been at such functions. I was usually the keynote speaker, and this is how you encourage people to give in charity. That they'll say, "Oh, Doctor So and So has donated $10,000. Who would like to match that?" And that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine. The point that I was making is that there are some individuals who their sole purpose in giving is just this cynical attempt to make themselves look good. That's what is to be avoided. So again, as far as anonymity, being anonymous, not anonymous, that's less important. Just as long as whether you're giving and your name is known or your name is not known, as long as you're giving for the right reason. That is the point. Here's a very nice question, and this is a question from Leon Faber. And it is, thank you for sharing your wisdom and for teaching Dharma. How should a leader of a Dharmic group deal with adharmic members? Should we, A, try to teach them, B, tolerate them, or C, expel them? Very good. This is the answer I'm going to give you, and it's interesting that you ended in that way. Teach them, tolerate them, or expel them. All three in accordance with the individuals you're speaking of. So first of all, you should try to teach them. You should try to teach them. If you see that they are learning, but let's say it's somewhat slowly, then you tolerate them as you continue to teach them. However, if you see that they are not learning, if you see that they are not just adharmic, but they are adharmic to the core, you expel them, you expel them, you expel them mercilessly. So first you try to teach them, because the thing is, you can even have individuals who have, somewhat of an adharmic mindset, but it's because of bad upbringing. It's because they were raised in our crazy culture as it is today. Our culture today is quite literally, if you can imagine a sane culture, a real culture, a dharmic culture, turned upside down. And as a result, we find that there are many people who, somewhat innocently, they just kind of regurgitate what they've learned from their family, from the media, from school, etc., etc. And as a result, they may be thinking in a somewhat adharmic way, but with enough teaching, they can change. Well, this is the first thing that you try to do. But then if you see that, no, this is someone who is inherently adharmic, indeed, you need to expel them. You need to, at that point, have nothing to do with them. So I hope that answers the question. Nice. Here is a very unique question from Jason, and I will definitely answer this. It is Namaste Acharyaji. Is it appropriate for a Sri Vaishnava to worship Gaura Nitai? And for those who don't know, that is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu. This is who he is speaking of. I feel a deep connection to Gaura Nitai from the time I spent in ISKCON. Let me tell you, there is absolutely nothing wrong with worshiping Gaura and Nitai. Absolutely nothing wrong with this. And indeed, you say that you have a very deep connection to them, and that's a positive thing. I've spoken about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu many, many times, and this would go for certainly Nityananda Prabhu as well, or let's say any of the very close associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And that is that indeed they are the greatest of Vaishnavas. They are the greatest of bhaktas, the greatest of devotees. In the case very specifically of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he is accepted as an Avesha avatar. He is not a Purna avatar. He is an Avesha avatar. This being the case, indeed, to even have murtis, for example, let's say, and I don't know, but let's say you have maybe murtis of Gauranitai on your altar. Oh, there's nothing offensive about this. You see, in even the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, we will often have um, uh, images of the Alvars, these 12 very, very great saints on our altars. Indeed, we worship them. Indeed, as I'm speaking to you, we have an image of Andal on our altar right now, actually, which is very nice. Absolutely nothing wrong with having murtis of these very great devotees and worshiping them and having deep affection for them. Indeed, how can one say it is offensive to have great devotion toward a pure Vaishnava? To say that would be offensive. So no, no. If you have a deep affection for Sri Sri Gauranitai, then please continue with that deep affection that you have for them, and you don't have to worry. Very good. So, Dancing Cloud 8, let me just say you probably came into our talk somewhat late. I already addressed your question at the very beginning and very, very thoroughly. So, when this is available as a video, go back to the beginning and your question is answered there. Hmm. This is the last question that I'll take just due to time, actually, and it's a very good, very practical one. And it's from Channel 47. How does one start to make the journey to conquer the senses? Very good. It begins first and foremost with learning and with association. So, by learning, what is meant by this is begin to read those books that will truly help you to control your senses. That is, those books that will teach you the way of the yogi. And what are those books? Well, scripturally speaking, that means Bhagavad Gita, certainly. That means Srimad Bhagavatam. That means the major Upanishads, so such as Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, Kata Upanishad, Kena Upanishad, Isha Upanishad, etc., Shvetashvatara Upanishad. So read the major ones. That means also read a book that is put out by the International Sanatana Dharma Society, known as Sanatana Dharma, the Eternal Natural Way. This book is available both on Amazon, but it's also available at dharmacentral.com. So you study and study and study in a true way. You study actual useful literature. The other way is by association. Association is crucial. And to do that, if you are not there already, please join our Discord server. And we just had a celebration actually a few days ago because we surpassed 500 members. We have, I think, 520 at least now, something like that, members of our Discord server. And it's the Dharma Nation Discord server. If they haven't already, I'm sure someone will put the URL in the chat. Please join that and learn from everyone who is on there. Have association. Become friends with other individuals who are devotees. In that way, you will be inspired to pursue this path in such a way that indeed you will come to the point of controlling your senses. And now, very practically, as far as practice, the third thing I'm going to say. There is only one way to truly control the senses, and that is meditation, meditation, meditation. You must learn how to do proper meditation. And if you don't know, or if you think you do, but you're not having a lot of luck, look at our playlist on this channel, on the Dharma Nation channel. We have a playlist on meditation. Watch all of those videos and begin to do meditation the way that I teach it, the way that my gurus, etc., have taught it. That is mantra meditation, meditating very specifically on the holy names of God. When you do this, in time, it will come to the point where you will have full control over your senses. And the last thing I'm going to say, and this is a thread all throughout all the things that I have said, if you wish to be a yogi and control your senses, whatever happens, never give up. Never lose hope. There is always, always, always hope. And you never give up. You stay on this path for however long it takes. And I guarantee you that if you have sincerity, if you have humility, if you have devotion, if you have great eagerness to achieve the goal, you will achieve the goal. But only if you don't give up. Very good. So with that, it's a little bit past 8. So we're going to end here. I thank you all very, very much for being here with me this evening. And I hope that this was beneficial for you. Again, what I said to this individual, Channel 47, applies to everyone listening to me now. Practice. Please take these words of advice. Don't just come to the live stream. I'm happy that you're here. But don't just come and then when the live stream is over, you just go on to your life as usual. Try to practice everything that was said here in these Dharma Shastras. Try to practice everything that you learned here. And that being the case, you also will come to know yourself perfectly and to know God. So with that, thank you for being here. I will see you next Monday. And namaste. Jaya Shriman Narayana. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Dharma Rashtra Jayate. Surya Vansha Jayate. Om Hari Om. And with that, everyone, between now and the next time that we get together, I ask you all that in every way you please take very good care of yourselves.